Okay, sorry about that break in the video. I was about to go into the cookie example of the line drawing fallacy. So let's talk about that. Suppose that I held a contest and I said, I am really in the mood for some wonderful home baked chocolate chip cookies. And whoever can't buy them, you have to make them from scratch. You have to make them yourself. Whoever can get me a freshly hot baked chocolate chip cookie first, they will win the contest and win some prize. Maybe like automatically get an A or some, I don't know, $100, whatever, some kind of desirable prize. Okay, so to win, you have to know how to bake chocolate chip cookies. And then you need the ingredients and you need an oven. You probably need a kitchen. So what would the ingredients be? It's kind of fun just to, like, what are, if we were in class, I'd say, okay, what are the ingredients in chocolate chip cookies? So, um, well, chocolate chips, right? Flour, butter, um, water, maybe. Vanilla extract is kind of like a secret ingredient. Brown sugar, eggs, maybe some baking powder or soda. I get those mixed up. So I think I've got most of the ingredients. Maybe I'm missing one or two. Okay, and so we have to mix it all up in the right proportion. And then we plop a bunch of the cookie dough, into little kind of balls, and we put it on a oven tray, and we set the oven to the appropriate temperature. What is it, like 375 plus or minus, something like that, and we have to bake them for a certain amount of time, right? And it will vary on how hot the oven is and certain recipes. So it could be 10 minutes, could be 8 minutes, could be 15 minutes. But remember, you guys are on the clock and you want to win this contest. So let's say one of you thought you were going to be clever. Excuse me. And so you put the cookie dough in the oven for like 30 seconds, and it like barely warmed the cookie dough. And then you brought the tray out and you said, do I win the prize? Do I automatically get an A? And I go like, well, this is kind of close. This is chocolate chip cookie dough, but it's not, you have to bake it. If you don't bake it, it's not a chocolate chip cookie, arguably. So that person wouldn't win. And so the question is, what's the shortest amount of time that you could get away with baking the chocolate chip cookie dough and win the contest? And it turns out that there's a gray area here. And there are things in this world and concepts that we have that are inherently vague. We talked about vagueness and ambiguity. And what we said about vagueness is that it comes in degrees, while ambiguity is like an on-off switch. It's all or nothing. Similar to validity. Arguments are valid or they are not valid. There's no in between. But when it comes to something like vagueness or maybe inductive strength, those concepts admit to varying degrees. So instead of the on-off switch, the metaphor we gave was like a fader switch, or like a light that has a dimmer on it. You could kind of fade it up slowly and fade it down slowly. I've one kind of close. It's over there. So this is just on off. But if we could kind of fade it up, fade it down, that has a whole continuum, a whole range that is, like a number line. There's an infinite number of numbers between, say any two whole numbers between 0 and 1, let's say. And it's the same thing for uh cookiehood or cookie dumb, like kingdom. When does a cookie become a cookie? Well, it if any point that you pick is going to be arbitrary. So you might say, well, what does the instruction say? What if the instruction says 8 to 12 minutes? Okay, so sounds like if you bake it for 8 minutes, you'll have a cookie. It maybe it's a little doughy on the inside, and some people like that. If I could be in the mood for that, definitely make it like a la mode. Sounds pretty good right now, actually. So that person would probably win the contest. But what if we put it in for like 4 minutes? The recipe says 8 to 12. Is that a cookie? Well, it's like underdeveloped. The answer is it's hard. It's maybe just a no, or it is a sort of, it's like a proto cookie. It's like on its way to being a cookie. And remember when we talked about definitions, we talked about precising definitions. So because there are these inherently nebulous, vague things and concepts in the world, sometimes we just need to make a call one way or the other. And so we're forced, maybe not forced like gun at our head, but for practicality's sake, we select, we opt for some line, and we will have to admit that it's to some degree arbitrary. So take the blood alcohol level for getting a DUI in the state of California, which is 0.08, I believe. Now, why is that the limit, or why is that the maximum amount of alcohol you can have in your blood and not get a DUI, or just under that? Well, it's not completely pulled out of thin air, right? It is based on what scientists and biologists and physicians know about blood chemistry and alcohol, and about how impaired the average person would get with that amount of alcohol in their system. And it probably was a committee, and there was vote like, oh, should we do 0.1? It was 0.08 too low a threshold. Should it be less than that? And so there's some kind of agreement on that, and it is to some extent arbitrary, because if they would have picked just slightly above that or slightly below it, if it were 0.081 or 0.079, that probably would do just as good a job. Maybe it's a little bit less even of a number, and so for helping people remember what it is, if it's something really specific, like like pi is not an even number. It's technically, it's such a weird number that we call it an irrational number. It's not like it's not like pi is 1.000, it's not like straight just an even whole number or an integer. It's this weird 3.14, and a bunch of you probably know it more than I do. So but we could have picked 0.09 or 0.07, right? And that probably would have been just as good. And so even the courts, even a judge would admit that this is to some degree arbitrary, but some degree based on what happens to the average human being when they have this amount of blood alcohol. And it's the same thing with cookie doughs turning into cookies. The companies that come up with these, or it doesn't have to be companies, it could be like a family member who has their own personal recipe. When they put in the time that it should be baked for, sometimes they'll do a range, so that helps. It helps with alleviate some of the arbitrariness, because picking an exact point can be very difficult. But if you give a range, and there's some wiggle room and some leeway, which is good for these inherently vague concepts. However, you do lose some precision. So there's a trade-off. There's a give and take if you give a range. And if you bake it for 1 second short of 8 minutes, is that going to be any different than 8 minutes? Probably not noticeable. Probably not. noticeable. So this might be just a feature of the world. Some things are black and white and some things aren't, and it just depends on the thing in question. So if we're talking about validity, it's black and white. If we're talking about strength, it comes in degrees. Another example, a day into night, or daytime and nighttime. When is it nighttime? Is it the instant the sun sets? Well, that doesn't seem quite right, because there's still some light. And for instance, I remember like on 4th of July fireworks shows, they want to have it at night because the fireworks are more stunning. There's more of a contrast with the brightness of the firework and the darkness of the night sky. And so they want to give people a good show, and so they want to wait until it's nighttime. But if so, you could say, well, hey, it's right when the sun sets, they could do it right then, so people don't have to wait. Especially like a lot of kids like going to those things, and kids can't stay up super late usually, and so they could do that. But it wouldn't be as good of a show because there's still light. So then what could we say? 10 minutes after sunset, 15 minutes, an hour? And again, we have some precising definitions. I think people in meteorology, or people who are, mariners, people who work on ports and on ships, they have some technical terms for this, so you could look them up. I don't know them offhand, and they might say, well, dusk is the period, it starts right when the sun sets and it goes, 25 minutes, half an hour after that, or something. Or twilight maybe like it could be a technical term. But again, a bunch of humans got together and came up with these lines, and so they are to some degree just arbitrary based on what individuals picked. And then also to a certain degree, there's reality pushing back, because it is objectively darker, longer and longer after sunset. And so another thing to keep in mind when we're talking about these vague concepts is there are going to be borderline cases where it's going to be a tough call. I mean, if we have a precise definition, then we can use that. But sometimes we don't even have one. I mean, we have one for blood alcohol level, but we don't really have one for cookiness. At best we have like the minutes of some recipe that you could find, but that's not like a legal authority. It's not like in the state of California, it's a cookie at 8 minutes, and it's not any time before that. That would be funny. I mean, we could come up with a law like that. That would be kind of goofy and hilarious, and it kind of makes me laugh just thinking about it. But we don't we don't have that. A chocolate chip cookie law. That's making me think of like a Willy Wonka type character. If he were a legislator, he might come up with something like that. So that means that we're gonna have borderline cases. A borderline case is an example where it's not exactly clear if it is the thing in question or not. So if at 7 minutes, is it a cookie or not? Well, it's pretty doughy in the middle. It's like almost there, but not quite. That's a borderline case. 10 minutes after sunset, is that night? Is that daytime or nighttime? Well, it's a borderline case. But a lot of philosophers have pointed out that the existence of borderline cases can make things confusing. However, that does nothing to invalidate the reality of the non-borderline cases. So what do I mean by that? Well, just because we can't precisely put our finger on when day turns into night or when cookie dough turns into a cookie, that doesn't mean that doesn't mean cookies don't exist, and that doesn't mean nighttime doesn't exist. So is it nighttime a minute before or after sunset? I don't know. But is it nighttime at 2 a.m., later that after sunset? And it depends on where you are in the world, but, say like in California at 2 a.m., it's nighttime. And that's not made up, and that's not invalidated by the arbitrariness or the imprecision or borderlineness of earlier cases. And you might think this is obvious, but believe it or not, in the 90s, some of you, probably don't remember this. Some of you might have lived through this. So I was, it was like in junior high school, but the O.J. Simpson trial in the 90s. Sorry, no, I'm getting some mixed up. It's the other major trial in the 90s. It was the LA riots. It was Rodney King, which was like in 1992 or 1993. And it's tough because it's kind of like America like relived that in the summer of 2020. So that was very real for probably everyone in this class with the events in Minneapolis. But so in the 90s, there was this person named Rodney King, and cell phones didn't exist back then, but there was camera footage of police officers who were like wailing away on Rodney King. And if you can the video is still online. You can go watch it. It's very hard to watch, and it just looks like it was like like maybe the one or two of these blows, I think they were like had clubs and maybe using their fists as well. Maybe one of them, maybe none of them were necessary. It's tough, like the adrenaline's pumping, and if somebody has violent and maybe could potentially hurt other people, you need to, well, you don't need to, but it would be not a bad idea to subdue them, right? And so you try to use words, and if that doesn't work, then force might be necessary. Okay, so it's kind of like, this is a necessary evil to protect innocent people, and maybe even the person himself. But then it just seemed to clearly go way beyond that. So the officers in question, the jury had to decide if excessive force was used by these officers. And when you ask most people, what caused the LA riots was the not guilty verdict of these four officers. I think it was four, and I'm pretty sure they were all white. Rodney King was black. And so it looks like Rodney King is just looked like it was clearly excessive force. And so it's like, oh, if justice is going to be served, then we would need a guilty verdict, but we got a not guilty verdict. And so that people just thought like, oh, there's no justice in this world. It's like we caught it on probably all these times when things like this have happened, and there weren't cameras, and it's just kind of like police officer's word against victim's word. But now at least we have technology, and we caught it on camera, so at least now we have the proof, and like people won't be able to get away with this anymore. But it's like, oh, even with the camera, it's like, wow, it's like, what's going on here? And so Los Angeles rioted, and there's a lot of burning down and looting. Okay, so how does that relate to line drawing, fallacy, and vagueness? Well, the defense attorney of the police officers argued something like the following. They played the tape in slow motion to the jury, and they slowed it down to like blow after blow, like Billy Club swing after Billy Club swing. And so they after the first one, they paused it and they say to jury, do you think this was excessive force? and not many people thought that it did. And then they hit play and they go to blow number 2. Was that excessive force? And I'm kind of making, I don't know exactly how exactly they did this or when they answers started to change, but so I'll just kind of recreate it just for the sake of this example. So after the second blow, no one in the jury says it was excessive. Third blow wasn't excessive. Fourth blow, maybe one person in a jury of 12 said, now it's excessive. And then fifth blow, sixth blow, seventh blow, and another person raises their hands, and you get all these different answers. And so what the defense asked was, why was it, it kind of made 2 points. Why was it excessive at whatever blow you chose, let's say the fifth blow, but not the fourth blow? So the crux of their argument hinged on the arbitrariness of when it was excessive force. But that is kind of a cheap move. And the defense there was almost intentionally trying to trap the jury into committing the line drawing fallacy. So they were trying to get the jury for them to say like, oh, I guess any specific blow that I pick will be to some extent arbitrary. And so it's not fair to say that there was excessive force. So remember when I said just because there are borderline cases, that doesn't invalidate the existence of cookies or nighttime or daytime. Similarly, yes, there will be borderline cases in excessive force because it's not all or nothing. Force can gradually become excessive. And just because there might be a case where it's not clear was it excessive or not, that doesn't mean that once you go well beyond that, which seemed to be captured in the video, that isn't excessive. So excessive force can still exist. And then the other point that they tried to make is, look, none of you can even agree about when it was excessive. So how can we, come out with a guilty verdict that will, put these people end their careers and put them in prison for a long time potentially? How can that be justice when it's based in such a piecemeal kind of not uniform agreement of the jury? If you're going to convict someone of something, you want there to be kind of uniform agreement. It was excessive and it was excessive here, but we're not getting that. We're getting, this person says it was after the 10th blow. This person said it was the third blow. It sounds like it was just a tough case and there was nothing definitive. So that's where the rubber hits the road. And, this class, a lot of it is theoretical and almost like mathematical puzzle solving, but it has real world applications. This is what we've been talking about. When we mistakenly think something is black and white, like it's all or nothing, when really there are shades of gray, you commit the line drawing fallacy. You're drawing a line, say in the sand, the metaphorical sand, and it's really not it's not needed or it's not appropriate. A person claims a line should be drawn when it's not appropriate. Or one more way to put it, assuming a line must be drawn when it's not appropriate or the concept is vague. So I brought in this vagueness. And by the way, I know I spent a lot of time on this, but I find it interesting. And we did talk about vagueness. So vagueness is discussed in the textbook, but our authors don't specifically talk about line drawing. But it is related to false dichotomy because you are saying it's either excessive or it's not. But that's a false choice or false dichotomy because there's a third option, could be a borderline case. Oh, and then a few more. Oh, yeah, a lot of more examples. Okay. Some of you might be thinking, okay, you might say, well, isn't there shades of gray in everything? A lot of students want to take it that far. But I would push back against that. And here are just a few examples where it's perfectly fine to have all or nothing thinking, or to say that there's no There's no vagueness. There's no borderline examples. Monday turning into Tuesday. There's an exact instant when that happens. So 12, if it's 11:59 and 59 seconds, it's, say, Monday. And then once it hits 12 a.m., it's the next day, that instant. And you can get as specific as you want and as precise as you want about that. Or a month turning into another month. So it's the last day of the month. Let's say it's March 31st. And then the next day it'll be April. And it's not like, my point is Monday doesn't gradually turn into Tuesday. It's like a light switch. March doesn't gradually turn into April. It happens in an instant. Or on your 21st birthday. So some of you might have turned 21 during the semester, or you have recently, or you will soon. A lot of people turn 21 and they're taking college classes. And that happens not gradually, it happens in an instant. I mean, you could argue that you age gradually, that's fair, but you are 20 every day of your, excuse me, every day when you're 20, you're 20. You're not like, at least that's the convention of how we count ages. I mean, I guess we could say like when you're a kid, you might say I'm 3.5 or I'm 4 3/4. But, once you're an adult, you don't do that. You just say you're 20 every day for 364 days, or I guess 365. But then once it's your birthday, you stop saying 20 and start saying 21. And we said the same thing about valid. It's valid or it's not. There's no borderline cases. And a lot of games, we set them up so that there's a winner and a loser. Some games, the rules can have a little bit more flexibility, and there can be some vagueness, but or they can be like ties or draws. But a lot of games, the way the rules are set up, there's a winner and there's a non-winner, and that's just the way it is. Yeah, so we did all these examples. Okay, good. Okay, let's go on to the next one. It's called equivocation. Let's start with the examples. So these are from the textbook. If Thomas gives Marie, or Mary, I guess Marie, a ring, then Thomas and Marie will be engaged. Thomas did give Marie a ring. In fact, he phoned her just the other night. Therefore, Thomas and Marie are engaged. Remember, we talked about ambiguity. So giving someone a ring is semantically ambiguous. And in this argument, we are using one meaning of ring in the first premise, and then an alternative meaning of ring in the second premise. In the first premise, presumably, we mean ring, like the thing, the circle thing of jewelry that you wear on your finger, on your ring finger. And then in the second premise, presumably, this is kind of a little bit more British. This is calling someone on the phone. You ring someone up, like the phone rings when you call them. Even though the structure of this seems to be valid, because it seems to be an example of a if A, then B, and the if condition is met in the second premise, seemingly, so then what follows the then should follow. So this is a very common argument. We'll talk about it much more later on in the course. So it seems valid, but this is actually an invalid argument. It's a mistake to think this is valid. And that's because we have equivocated with this term ring. Let's look at the second one here. A crust of bread is better than nothing. Yeah, okay, so it's like if you are starving, you'll take anything, even a little crust of bread. That's better than not eating anything. It's better than nothing. Nothing is better than true love. Okay, so it's like true love it's great, and so great that nothing beats it. That's kind of what we're saying here. Therefore, conclusion, a crust of bread is better than true love. So an absurd conclusion. And again, the structure of this argument seems to work, but that's only because we're guilty of equivocation. The way that we are using nothing here is not the same way that we're using it here. But if you read it quickly, it seems like you're saying A is better than B is better than C. So then logically, it would seem to follow that A is better than C, which is a crust of bread is better than true love. But it's almost like a joke argument because there's a shift in meaning. Yeah. So what's happened? So it occurs when different meanings of an ambiguous term are conflated. Oh, nope, let's do this. Well, see, I was going to say of ambiguous terms. No, yeah, when occurs when different meanings of an ambiguous term are conflated. You conflate something when you mix them up or you use them in different meanings and you go back and forth between them. In other words, the conclusion of these arguments depends on a shift in meaning of a word or phrase. So there was a shift in meaning of ring here and of nothing. Okay, next one is called amphiboly. Amphiboly. Amphiboly is also rooted in ambiguity, but the ambiguity is a syntactic one. So that means that the ambiguity stems from the order of the words in the sentence. It's not that an individual term is ambiguous. Instead, it's the sentence as a whole is unclear or ambiguous because of its structure, its order, or its syntax. So I think the examples will make it clear. Mrs. Hart stated in her will, I will leave my 500-carat diamond necklace and my pet chinchilla or chinchilla to Alice and Teresa. Therefore, we conclude that Alice gets the necklace and Teresa gets the chinchilla. Well, if you are Teresa or Teresa, whatever, you might say, wait a second. I'm reading this differently than you're reading this. So this is not a well-written will or line in a will because it's not clear. It's ambiguous. What does this mean? It could mean what this conclusion is stating, that there are these two things, and I'm going to leave them to these two people. And the first thing is going to go to the first person I mentioned. And the second thing is going to go to the second person I mentioned. That's one way to read it. The other way to read it is that Alice and Teresa both have an equal claim to both of the items being bequeathed. So that's the term you use for giving something away in a will, a bequeathment. Yeah. So, but notice there's no specific term in this sentence that is ambiguous. We know what the diamond necklace is. We know what this pet chinchilla is. We know who Alice and Teresa are, but there's still another way to read this. So that shows us that there's a second kind of ambiguity. And that's syntactic ambiguity. The normal kind of ambiguity, when there's an ambiguous term, is semantic, sometimes called semantic ambiguity. Okay, let's do more examples. Clear this up. It's always good to do examples to get clear. Mr. James signed a contract that reads, in exchange for painting my house, I promise to pay David $5,000 and give him my new Cadillac, only if he finishes the job by May the 1st. Okay, let's read that again. Okay, in exchange for painting my house, I promise to pay David $5,000 and give him my new Cadillac, only if he finishes the job by May 1st. Therefore, since David did not finish until May 10th, it follows that he gets neither the $5,000 nor the Cadillac. So if you are David, you might say, wait a second, there's two ways to read this statement. Yes, you could read it the way you did, where I get nothing, but there's another reading, which is also, but by the way, it's when you have this syntactic ambiguity, a lot of times it's not like there's a correct meaning of the two. If there, sometimes there's more than two interpretations. It's just that you could go either way, and that's what's annoying about ambiguity is unless we have some context, either interpretation is perfectly acceptable, right? Like when I remember he chased the girl in the car, right? One way is that the dude is driving the car. He's chasing the girl with the car that he's driving with. Another one is he's running after the love of his life. He's about to drive away out of his life. Which of those is the right way to hear that sentence? He chased the girl in the car. Without other context, they're both perfectly acceptable. And same thing here. So this is why if you, there's a lot of miscommunication because people are saying things that are ambiguous. So if you're David, you're saying, wait. Here's another perfectly fine way to read this. I get, I'm doing a job. I'm paying your house. And so I'm going to get $5,000. And there's a bonus if I do it quickly. So I get the $5,000 for doing the base work, whether it's by May 1st or May 10th, I get $5,000, but then I get the Cadillac as a bonus, but I only get that Cadillac if I do it quickly. Okay, I didn't do it quickly, but you still owe me $5,000. But this person's saying, no, this condition, finishing by May 1st, that condition must be met to get both the Cadillac and the $5,000, which is also another way to read this. So it's syntactically ambiguous. And so the person is guilty of amphiboly. So a lot of students, they get these mixed up, equivocation versus amphiboly. But really, the difference is what kind of ambiguity is at the heart of the fallacy. Is the confusion because of a term that has multiple meanings, a shift in meaning of a word or phrase, or is it the order, the syntax of the statement as a whole? And it's usually made by someone other than the arguer. This is also from the textbook, just to clear up the difference between the two. Amphiboly differs from equivocation in two ways. The first, equivocation is always traced to an ambiguity in the meaning of the word or phrase. That's why I said it's based on semantic ambiguity. So for philosophers, when we talk about semantics, we're talking about meanings. Whereas amphiboly involves a syntactical ambiguity in the statement. The second difference is that, so is the ambiguity in a specific word or phrase, or is it because of the order of the words in the entire sentence or statement? What is this sentence or statement? Remember, we said sentences express statements or propositions. Second difference is that amphiboly usually involves a mistake by the arguer in interpreting an ambiguous statement. So it's not by the person who's arguing, it's by the listener, if you will, or the reader, made by someone else. Whereas the ambiguity in equivocation is typically the arguer's own creation. Yeah, so the second difference, I wouldn't worry about that as much. To keep these straight, just ask yourself, what's confusing? Is it a specific word or phrase, or is it the entire statement? Is it the order of the words in the entire statement, or is it a specific word or phrase? Okay, we're almost ready. We're going to do a couple more, and then we will practice, and then we'll be done. All right, we've got the fallacy of composition. This one's kind of fun. I think we even might have done this at the very beginning when we talked about, our first example of an informal fallacy. We did this one. And this is one of the two. We're going to do fallacy of composition and division. This one is the fallacy of composition. Yeah. Okay. Let's start with the example this time. Atoms, so the little bits of matter that make up all objects in the world, physical objects, are not visible to the naked eye. Okay, that's a premise, and that's true. Atoms are so small that we can't see them, without like some super powerful microscope. Premise 2, humans are made up of atoms. It's also true, right? We're carbon-based life forms. We're like 70 or 80% water. Water is H2O. Water is comprised chemically of molecules, and those molecules are made up of atoms. So if most of us is water, most of us is H2O, a lot of you is hydrogen and oxygen atoms, which isn't that interesting. And we're carbon-based life forms, so there's a lot of carbon in us. We breathe in a lot of, the air is actually more nitrogen than oxygen, so we have some nitrogen in us. And then a lot of those like minerals have atoms, you want some zinc and iron, so we got some of that. I think we even have like some gold. A lot of people have gold atoms in their bodies. I think look that up. Isn't that kind of funny? I think I was watching this. I was watching the Summer Olympics. Well, I guess it didn't have to be summer, but I think it was the Summer Olympics one year, and the ad was like, every human being has whatever 0.001 grams of golds inside of them. We all have a little gold inside of us. So cheer on your country as they chase for more gold to add to that. Something like that. Yeah, but it was kind of interesting. Okay, so these premises are both true. Conclusion, humans are not visible to the naked eye. So the person, what they are assuming is that what's true of something's parts must also be true of the whole. So yes, our parts are invisible. The things that make us up are not visible to the naked human eye, but that doesn't mean that human beings are invisible. So it's called the fallacy of composition because you are going from the parts to the whole. A whole is a composite, if you will, of its parts. You're kind of creating this composition of parts to get to the whole. By the way, yeah, sometimes what's true of the parts is true of the whole, but the fallacy is thinking that this always is the way it is. Every part of me weighs less than the Statue of Liberty. I don't know why I thought of that, right? Every part of me, every part of you weighs less than the Statue of Liberty. And as a whole, all of us, I would hope, I guess I don't know that. Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I know this. All of us weigh less than the Statue of Liberty. So that's true of the parts, is true of the whole in that case, but it just, you can't generalize that, like in this example. So it's assuming what's true of the parts, true of the whole. Always. Individually, every one of you has a mom, or at least you were, there was a mom at some point in your life, right? That's just the way we come into this world, right? We're born from our mothers. Okay, so that's true. So could we conclude that as a group, we have a mother? So our class is a composite of individuals. Each of those individuals has a mother, or your mom passed, I apologize, or had a mother. But does that mean that as a composition, as a whole thing, that we have some sort of class mother? Who would that be? Because it's not me. That's fallacy of composition. And probably my favorite example fallacy of composition is just list your favorite foods. So you can pause a video and you can write them down or say them out loud. Just make a list of like 5 or 10 of your favorite foods. And so you might say things like French fries, pizza, tacos, pasta, and throw in some if you have a sweet tooth. Ice cream, brownies, chocolate chip cookies, Thai food, sushi, and add whatever you want to that list. So those are a list of your favorite foods. So individually, those are all delicious or tasty to you. That's why you pick them. Does that mean that if we put them all into a blender and we made a composite of all of those foods, that we would have some new delectable sushi, Thai, ice cream, pizza slushy? No, just because the individual parts are delicious doesn't mean that some blended version of all of that together would be delicious. That'd be the fallacy of composition. And finally, the fallacy of division. So this is the same fallacy, but in reverse. So instead of assuming what's true, the parts is true of the whole, what we're going to do is assuming that because we can describe the whole or the group in a certain way, correctly, accurately, that each individual part also can be described in that way. So here's the tennis ball example. Tennis balls are, I mean, not all of them, but we come up, a lot of them are neon green. Does that mean that the atoms that make up that tennis ball are also neon green? No, that's a fallacy of division. So we're starting from the whole, or it could be like a group, and then we're dividing it into the parts, and we're labeling the parts based on the whole. And again, sometimes that might be the case. I do use the same Statue of Liberty example. I weigh less than the Statue of Liberty, and all my parts weigh less than the Statue of Liberty. But it doesn't always work that way. Okay, and then finally, our last example before we do some of the exercises from the book is take a dessert that a lot of people like cake. For many of us, cake is tasty. It is delicious, especially if it's a kind of cake that you like. Maybe you like chocolate cake. Maybe you like yellow cake with white frosting. Maybe you like cupcakes. Maybe you like ice cream cake. Just pick anyone you want. Does that mean all the ingredients of that cake are delicious and tasty individually? Of course not, right? Flour, raw flour is an ingredient in cake. Do you want to eat raw flour? Sugar. There's what makes cake so sweet and delicious. There's sugar in there. Oh, I think I forgot to mention, I guess I said brown sugar when I was mentioning the ingredients of cookies before. Sugar helps make the cake good, but do you want to eat just teaspoons of sugar by itself? That's too sweet. Cakes usually call for raw eggs. Do you want to eat raw eggs? Is that delicious? I mean, some of you might. I guess it depends on the person, but I think you get my point. Is that we have the fallacy of division. Just because the whole is delicious doesn't mean everything that it's made of is also tasty. Assuming what's true of the whole is true of the parts. Okay, so we need to do 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3. Let's do it. 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, 3, 4, 1. So we are looking for fallacies, presumption, ambiguity, illicit transference. And we didn't go over all the, there's so many fallacies. I picked the ones that I think are the most interesting, and the exercises will be based on the ones that we talked about exclusively. Okay. Either we require forced sterilization, of third world peoples, or the world population will explode and all of us will die. We certainly don't want to die, so we must require forced sterilization. Well, this sounds like a false dichotomy. Must it be A or B? No, because we could have a third option. We might not have population explosion and we might not have forced sterilization. Maybe people will just have less kids on their own, or as nations get more developed, or people are more educated or become more democracies, the average amount of children that couples tend to have goes down. So that looks like a false dichotomy. And so that was weird. Yeah. False dichotomy. Every sentence in this paragraph is well written, therefore the paragraph is well written. No, that's the fallacy of composition. Every sentence might be well written, but maybe, take a well written sentence out of these are a bunch of books behind me. Let's take a well written sentence out of 10 of them randomly and put them all together. They're each well written, but the paragraph probably make no sense. That's fallacy of composition. James said that he saw a picture of a beautiful girl stashed in Stephen's locker. Okay. We can conclude that Stephen has broken the rules because girls are not allowed in the locker room. Well, a picture of a beautiful girl and a girl herself are not the same thing. So that is amphibole, because what's in the locker? Is it the picture or the girl? There's an ambiguity there. Well, I mean, seems pretty clear. He saw a picture. Yeah. Okay, we did this, the ring one. So that was equivocation, of course, 10 on ring. Each and every cell in this carrot is 90% water. Therefore, the entire carrot is 90% water. So a lot of times students, they'll say, when we go through this, they'll say, oh, this is division or composition. I can't tell which one it is. Well, are you going from a claim about the parts to the whole? If so, it's composition, fallacy of composition. Or are you going from a claim about the whole to the parts? Whole to parts, you're dividing the whole into parts, or are you making a composite out of parts? So we're talking about the parts to the whole, so we're composing. So the 14 is, it would be, so this is I didn't mean to throw you off. So this, we did go from parts to whole, but this is just the reason why the authors here put no fallacy is because this is one of those cases where it works. So the general form here, you have to be very careful with it, but this is one of the times where it works. Remember, I gave an example of, let's see, so this is composition. Like I said, every part of me weighs less than the Statue of Liberty, therefore all of me weighs less than the Statue of Liberty. That's where it works. The same thing here. Every cell is 90% water, but I'm also 90% water the whole. So you have to be careful. All right, Switzerland is 48% Protestant. Heidi Gilsing is a Swiss. Therefore, Heidi Gilsing is 48% Protestant. Well, we're going from a claim about the whole to its part, right? So this is all of Switzerland, and we're dividing Switzerland into its citizens. We're saying that the whole is 48% Protestant, so each individual part has got to be Protestant. So we are dividing. That's fallacy of division, 19. Okay. Let's see. Did I want to do 2 here? Yeah, 2. Guess I think there's just one in here that I was going to have you do. True or false? Arguments that commit the fallacy of begging the question are normally valid. Oh, yes, I know why I put this in here. So this trips students up. So the answer is true. This is really weird students out. So remember, outside of this class, you might use the term valid as a synonym for good. That's a good point. That's a valid point. But philosophers and logicians, and in this class, we have a technical definition. We have, like a specialized kind of jargon definition of valid, and valid doesn't mean good. It's like one of the components of a good argument. So a valid argument is one where the conclusion has to be true given the premises, like assuming the premises are true. So the inference is deductively good. But the argument could still be bad overall. It could be unsound because maybe one or more of the premises are false. So when you beg the question, you are assuming what you're trying to prove. So all arguments that are begging the question will be valid. It's just that a lot of them will be unsound. Like if I just here, the simplest type of circular argument or begging the question argument is just one where the premise is the conclusion. So if I say, like, oh, what day of the week is it? Oh, it's Monday. Well, what's your evidence? Well, it's Monday, right? People say it is what it is. Well, okay. What's the way that we could solve climate change? Well, we could solve if we could figure out a way to solve climate change, we will have solved climate change. Yeah. So it's not that the argument's invalid. It's just trivial. It's like you're saying A, therefore A. You're just repeating yourself. And so in one sense, of course that's correct. Of course that's valid. But the problem is you need to go elsewhere for the evidence of the conclusion. You can't just can't use the conclusion as a premise. That's the circular part. So arguments that are guilty of this fallacy, they are normally valid, but they're bad because they're probably unsound, or you're kicking the can down the road. So the follow-up question will be, okay, fine, it's valid, but is it sound? If it's sound, we have to know whether or not the premises are true. But the argument doesn't give you any evidence for the premise, because the premise is the conclusion, and the conclusion, we haven't supported it in any other way than just by stating it as a premise. Okay, and we're let's see, we have to do just a few more here. Number 3, 2, okay. We're still just identifying fallacies here. Oh, we did this one. A crust of bread is better than nothing. Nothing is better than true love. Therefore, a crust of bread is better than true love. So that is another argument that equivocates. In one sense, nothing means having nothing to eat, and the other it means nothing at all or nothing in existence. The idea that Black people in this country live in poverty is ridiculous. Look at LeBron James. He's a millionaire, and so is Sean Combs, Samuel L. Jackson, and Michael Jordan. Okay, so this exercise is asking us about fallacies that we covered in other video lectures. So this sample is way too small, and it's also a biased sample. It's not representative. So it's definitely a hasty generalization. And also the people we picked are not representative of the entire Black population in the United States. Yeah, so hasty generalization. How can you make a claim about millions of people based on, was it 4 or 5? 1, 2, 3, 4. You're generalizing. Right, so that's back up here. Yeah, hasty generalization. And I would argue that it's also a weak analogy. Also a weak analogy. Because there's too much of a difference. There's too much of a difference between, you're drawing an analogy between these four individuals and the entire Black community. And they're too different. Yes, these people are all Black Americans, but they're not representative. So this sample is too different from the target population. Okay. And we just have, okay, still have a few more. We'll go through these. Professor Andrews, surely I deserve a B in logic. I know that I've gotten Fs on all the tests. If you give me an F for my final grade, I will lose my scholarship. That will force me to drop out of school, and my poor aged parents, who yearn to see me graduate, will be grief-stricken for the rest of their lives. So did they give a good reason for why they should not be dropped? Why they should not receive an F? No, they are just appealing to this person's pity and sympathy. That's appeal to pity. We know that induction will provide dependable results in the future because it has always worked in the past. So scientists use induction when they make generalizations based on observations, so, like Halley's Comet will get close to the Earth again, like every, whatever it is, 70 or 80 some odd years, because it's done it. We have records of it doing it, 50 times in the past. And so we will extrapolate into the future. So that's an example of induction, scientific induction. It's provided dependable results in the future. It will provide dependable results in the future because it's always worked in the past. And so it has worked in the past. That's true. So this is a prediction about the future. Whatever has consistently worked in the past will continue to work in the future. And we know that this is true because it's been established by induction. This isn't good. We are trying to justify induction by appealing to induction itself. So this is circular reasoning. This is begging the question. Induction will work in the future. It's worked in the past. And in general, whatever has worked in the past will work in the future. Okay, so far this is okay. Whatever works in the past will work in the future. Induction has worked in the past, so it'll work in the future. I'll say that one more time. Whatever has worked in the past will work in the future. Okay, that sounds reasonable. Here's an example of something that's worked in the past. The inductive method. Okay, so then if this premise is true, this general premise, then it'll work in the case of induction. So it's worked in the past, so induction will work in the future. Great. But how do we know whatever worked in the past will work in the future? Well, that is the case because we have used induction itself to justify this premise. Wait a second, but we're using this premise to justify induction. So we're saying induction works because of this premise, and this premise is true because of induction, and round we go. Circular logic, no good. Mr. Franklin has lost at the craps table for the last 10 throws of the dice. Therefore, it is extremely likely that he will win on the next throw. It's never extremely likely in a normal craps table. The odds at best are a little bit less than 50%. So this is the gambler's fallacy, which is an example of false cause, more general fallacy. Raising a child is like growing a tree. So we have an argument by analogy here. Sometimes violent things such as cutting off branches have to be done to force the tree to grow straight. Similarly, corporal punishment must sometimes be inflicted on children to force them to develop properly. So this is just a bad analogy. Just a weak analogy. Children are maybe similar to trees in some ways, right? They're both living things, but they are not similar enough to reason this out. So that's a weak analogy, not a good analogy. And finally, another bit of begging the question, circular reasoning. The Book of Mormon is true because it was written by Joseph Smith. Okay, so that's a premise. So Joseph Smith is the founder of Mormonism. And so the claim is that the Book of Mormon is true because it was written by Smith. Smith wrote the truth because he was divinely inspired. Okay. So the logic of this so far isn't bad. Whether or not these premises are true, that's an empirical question. But let's suppose that Smith was divinely inspired, then presumably everything that he wrote would be true. And if he wrote the Book of Mormon, it would be true. So the logic here so far is fine. But how do we know that Joseph Smith was divinely inspired? Well, that's where the argument continues, and we find the circularity. We know Smith was divinely inspired because the Book of Mormon says that he was, and the Book of Mormon is true. And round and round we go. So we know it's true because it was written by this person who was divinely inspired. We know he was divinely inspired because this book says so. Which book? The Book of Mormon. Well, how do we know that book is true? Well, because it was written by Joseph Smith. He was divinely inspired. How do we know he was divinely inspired? Because the book says so. How do we know the book is true? Well, it's because you see, you just keep going round and round, and we're begging the question. Circular reasoning. All right, that was a bit long, but a pretty good. I want to say conversation, even though this is. I mean, I guess it's a conversation asynchronously, but that's all I have for you. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.